Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our third video in our mini series on what is conscious EFT. What is it, how to use it, how to bring it into your life. We are your hosts. I'm Jen Cincurak.
And Nancy Forrester. Hi, Jen. Hi, everybody.
And we're really excited to get into this episode because we teased you last time and said we were going to get into more about what is using EFT consciously, what is conscious EFT, and really how it ties into that safety piece. So we're going to dive in right away with Nancy describing what is conscious EFT, since this is really your baby.
Yeah, it is my baby, and it's really important to me because, as we said last time, I was introduced to EFT in the late 90s. And as a psychotherapist and as a scientist, I saw the power of the modality almost instantaneously. I experienced the power of the modality. However, I had some concerns about it in terms of how it was being used in the world. And I lived with those concerns for quite a few years until we began to get more information about two things, really. First of all, about trauma, how trauma is initiated, what it is, its impact on our lives. But then the second thing is how trauma is stored in the body. And then, because I'd been studying energy psychology and all the subtle energy systems of the body, I went, oh, and how does it impact on our energy systems? And so what I began to understand is that some of the ways that I was being taught how to use EFT were not actually safe for the nervous system. So we talked last time about the 3 E's, and the third E was about the evolution of survival and how important safety is to a human being and to a nervous system. And so there were some strategies being used in EFT that I saw were incredibly stressful and dysregulating for the nervous system, and could actually throw people into reactions which were very, very destabilizing. And so one of the questions that I was holding over the years is, well, then how can I take the power of EFT and meld it with what we're learning about trauma and trauma's impact in a way that is safer and also leads to sustainable change and significant change. So, it's not hard to help somebody change their energy in the moment. It really isn't, right? I laugh. I just have to say, I just have to bring in a puppy and people's energy changes in the moment. But the challenge is, how do you facilitate a sustainable and significant change that a nervous system can hold over time? So those were the questions that were informing how I was creating conscious EFT. And so what I came to was an understanding from a lot of different reading about trauma experts in the field about developing a phased approach to this work. And so in conscious EFT, we have 4 phases, where the first phase is really about trauma recovery. So let's just draw a line here. Every single one of us, everybody listening, myself, you, we've all got trauma. It's unavoidable in this life that we have. And trauma impacts on the quality of the life that we're living today. So phase 1 is about, how do you help a client improve the quality of their life today? So I call it trauma threads, right? So the trauma happened previously, but the thread, the emotional, the cognitive, the energetic thread of that trauma lives on today. We even know that trauma gets passed down generationally now. And so how are those trauma residue threads actually showing up in our life today? And how can we help ourselves and help our clients dissolve those threads, so to speak, such that the quality of their life improves today? So that's all phase 1. And then phase 2 is really beginning to look at, well, then how do you use EFT to resolve the trauma? Phase 2 would be about adult trauma, so ages 20 and above. It's much, much different to have trauma when you're an adult than when you're a child. because we're just so much better resourced as adults.
Hmm.
You know, children, we're in a dependent state. And so trauma can be much more significant for children. So phase 3 then deals with childhood trauma, whether it's one-time significant trauma like a car accident or perhaps a hospital stay, or whether it's more complex in terms of continual trauma of different types. I'm not going to be very specific here because I don't really want to trigger anybody
Hmm.
into their trauma. So that's the phase 2 and 3 is really about trauma resolution. How do you actually dissolve that trauma from the body?
Hmm.
And then my own personal favorite, I'm so excited about this, and this is phase 4. And phase 4 is all about neuroplasticity, really recent learnings that we have about how the brain works, how the brain learns, and how the brain can let go of limiting beliefs and stories. And
Hmm.
so phase 4 is really looking at how do we encourage the brain to move out of the old stories, which are often shame-based and guilt-inducing and anger-provoking and all of
Right.
those uncomfortable emotions. And how can we encourage and teach the brain to hold a new story of truth and authenticity, and to hold that over time so that we begin to behave and act out of that new truth. So there we go. In a nutshell, that's conscious EFT.
Fantastic. And thanks for giving that to us so we have a better understanding of where we're coming to with this.
You're
You
welcome.
said something in there that I thought, oh, maybe we should tell people about that. So for those who aren't practitioners or medical people or healthcare practitioners, maybe we should define what is trauma or what means a traumatic moment. Because even for me, before I started doing trauma studies, I thought trauma had to be like a
Yeah.
really big, crazy warfare, like horrific childhood experience
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
actually there are 4 parameters that need to be met. And you would be surprised the very small thing that can meet those 4 parameters. So
Absolutely. I think
maybe
that's
we
a
can go
great
over
idea.
that.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and do that, Jen?
Sure. And feel free to pop in
I
when you
will.
need. So the 4 sort of tenets or parameters that need to be met to create lasting trauma, because we all have lots of stressful things that happen, right? And you could be part of an experience that happens and there's 1,000 people around you and maybe 10 people are not bothered by it, but the other 900 are, or vice versa. So what makes some people react and not others? So the first one is that it has to be something that is surprising or that came out of nowhere, that was shocking, that was unexpected in some way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
Mm-hmm.
like, say, in the case of a car accident,
Yeah.
or someone says something harsh to you, you didn't see it coming, you weren't expecting it, so you couldn't
Yeah. Yeah.
protect
It
yourself.
it doesn't it doesn't fit with your expectations of the way your life is going to unfold. So it's
Right.
jarring, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second one is that thing that happens unexpectedly, it's meaningful to you in some way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form. So it feels more dramatic and
Mm-hmm.
bigger to you, which is why you can have siblings or best friends who have a parent or a teacher do something.
Yeah.
And to one kid, no big deal. To one kid, oh my goodness, because it was more meaningful and
Mm-hmm.
dramatic to them.
Mm-hmm.
The third part of that is that somewhere in this, it was really intense. The experience was you interpreted as something that was a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a drama, but there was also something large about it and intense about it.
Yeah.
And there, in some way, shape, or form, you didn't feel like you had agency, like you
Yeah.
had any help, like you could do anything about it. There was some sense of powerlessness there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A sense of really being isolated and alone
Yeah.
and not being able to manage what was happening. That's the helplessness, hopelessness piece of trauma.
Right, right. Thanks for saying that that way, because it's
Mm-hmm.
really important is that in these situations, it doesn't matter if you were one of those people in the crowd of 1,000. In that moment, you felt completely alone,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
isolated.
Absolutely.
So think about, yeah, really huge cataclysmic things, of course, would meet those criteria, but it honestly could just be a look that you got that really threw you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have an example.
Mhm.
So my son, when he was about 6 years old, I took him to what's called the Science Center here in Ontario. And it was like a big deal for us to go and spend a day at the Science Center. And it's built into the side of a cliff. So you ride down escalator, escalator, escalator until you're basically facing into a mountain. And we're at the lowest level of this Science Center, and the fire alarm goes off. Okay. So I immediately go into a reaction to that. However, it's not traumatizing to me because I immediately have a plan. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know exactly where I'm going to go, and I know exactly how I'm going to get my son out of there. And furthermore, I'm not alone in it. I know about firefighters, and I know about protective measures and all of that kind of stuff. So for me, it was a reaction. And yes, it was an intense reaction. I did not want to be in the Science Center at the bottom level facing into a hill with a fire alarm going on. However, for my child at 6 years old, it was a totally different experience, because even though I was there, in his little brain, he felt like he was all isolated in this. And it was so dramatic and it was so intense. And he didn't have a plan. His little rational brain wasn't big enough or strong enough to actually come up with a plan to get him out of there. And so for him, this was actually a traumatic event that he and I have actually worked on over the years. And he'll refer to it, even though he's 29 now, he'll sort of go, well, that's how I felt when we were in the Science Center and the fire alarm went off. So two different people, same situation, but different experience of this.
I didn't plan on bringing this up, but now your story just made this clear. So this is
Right.
extremely relevant and recent. A couple of days ago, I was merging onto a large highway and I hit a patch of ice
Oh,
or water or something. I don't,
yeah.
but I wanted to say this all happened and some nice bystander had pulled off and came to see me after to say, "Are you okay?"
Mm,
Yes, I was fine. And then at that moment, my son said something to me, and I had forgotten he was there in the moment of managing all of this
absolutely.
hugeness. And I turned around and his little lip was quivering, and I thought,
Oh,
okay, I know what to do.
yeah.
Even though when it's the real moment, sometimes it's hard to gather, but I was able to say to him all the things that you would want to say to your son in the Science Center or whatever.
Yeah.
This is what happened.
Yeah.
This is what I did. And
Mhm.
here's what we're going to do next. You want to
Absolutely.
come climb up into the front seat. Now we were pulled off to the side. You want to come climb up to the front seat. And then of course we tapped and I did
Yeah.
all the things I needed to do with him
Absolutely.
so that he
Absolutely.
knew what was happening. And when there was a slight change of plans, like I thought we might need a tow truck, but as it turns out that we just were able to change the tire and get it to the shop to fix it. But he was like, "Mom, I thought you were calling the tow truck."
Right.
And so I had to go back and
Yeah.
say, right, we realize now that we can drive it there, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely. Oh, well, first of all, I'm so glad you're okay and he's okay. And I'm sorry that that happened. And it's a
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful example of,
yeah,
as mothers, how sometimes we we just forget that the consciousness of our children is different than ours. And I'm so excited about all the things that we're learning about trauma and what it means for a child to have these experiences, and how parents can educate themselves about
yeah.
how to be with them in ways that they don't have to carry this in their body for years and years and years.
That's right. That's right. And I keep checking in with him. Do you need to talk about it some more? Because he really wanted to tell his grandparents. And we were like,
Hmm.
how about maybe we just get home first?
Yeah.
I understand that you want to tell though, et cetera. Anyway, so we keep checking in, but I think these two examples might be really good for us to play with though, as we run the rest of this episode,
Hmm.
because in addition to defining those four tenets of trauma for you, we wanted to tell you about this understanding of this one nerve inside of our nervous system that
Hmm.
is part of what links our body and our brain together. So there's this neuroscientist who from the 1970s has been working on this. So for many decades now, thank you, Stephen Porges, for discovering this and for,
Yeah.
making it your life's work. And this nerve is called the vagus nerve.
Right.
So I don't want to get boringly scientific to you, but it actually is such a cool thing and a way to appreciate what your nerves do for you. So I'm going to attempt to do this in a really succinct and not too boring sciencey way,
It'll
despite
be.
the fact that I geek out over
I was
that.
going to say it'd be a first for you, Jen, if you can do this in a
Well,
succinct
we shall see.
way.
So I apologize to everyone beforehand.
You get so excited.
So this nerve runs from, the back, this old part of our brain, from the brainstem, like when your spinal cord comes up to your brain, that's kind of where the in between. And it leads down from a couple of different places in the brainstem, down your spinal cord, and then it supplies, first off, it supplies some of facial muscles, and it supplies the way that we hear. It's like attached to some of the other nerves that help us to hear, and the way that we understand people's tone of voice and their facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And then it travels down. It's this really, really huge nerve, and it's actually called the Wanderer is its nickname, or it was named after that. So then this vagus nerve goes down and it supplies your heart and your lungs, so the things that are automatically, keeping you alive from day to day. And then it passes down into the lower part of below your chest, into your abdomen, and it supplies all of the organs there. So all of your digestive organs, all like the accessory organs that help you to digest and basically carry out your basic life functions, like how to survive and be alive, right? And the interesting part is that a lot of the nerve fibers, yes, of course, go from our brain to our body in this nerve. And that's what we're so used to thinking, our brain controls our body, right? But actually, in this case, most of the nerve fibers come from the organs to the brain. Right. So it's constantly getting feedback from your internal environment and feeding you information. So it's like living proof that your body and your brain, and wellness in your body and wellness in your brain, are connected. And, you can't really have one without the other. Yeah. Or one can affect the other. So Nancy, do you want to tell us, before I say more, do you want to tell us a bit about the word or the phenomena called neuroception?
Yes, I do. And I also, before I go do that, there's a piece here that is exciting to me, because what you're explaining really is why conscious EFT gives us such a strong modality to deal with the residue of trauma and then to resolve the trauma. And it's because the way our field, our helping field, has evolved is we, for 50, 60 years, have known about cognition, have known about the mind, have known about thoughts, and we've developed therapies and coaching interventions which deal with thinking. However, because of Stephen Porges's work and the way you're explaining this, we're understanding that just working with thoughts is not sufficient, because the vast majority of the information is actually coming from the body up into the mind. And so it's exciting that the field has evolved to include what's happening in the body, that is to say, the emotions and the sensations of the body. So it's a much bigger, expansive field today than what it used to be. And so then that leads me into this concept of neuroception, because it brings the idea of the somatic piece, the body piece, the emotions and the sensations, out into the energy work. So everything is energy. Everything is energy, and we live in an energetic field. So the question becomes, well, how does the information of the energy field actually come into the body and then get sensed as our hearing, seeing, taste, touch, all of those things, and our emotional experiences? And that comes to this word of neuroception, which means that we are constantly perceiving the world in an energy framework. So a framework bigger than even, oh, I feel like somebody's kicked me in the gut, or I'm feeling really angry, or I'm thinking that that person's an idiot, right? Neuroception is all happening in this invisible way that we're perceiving our environment energetically, both our external environment and our internal environment. So it's giving us information that is then coming to the level of sensory perception and emotional perception in the body, and then ultimately to the cognition, to the story that we're building. So emotional freedom techniques is an energy-based technique. We're doing acupressure points and tapping on meridians and chakras. And so it gives us a way to intervene at the level of neuroception. so that we're not even having to wait until these later stages of the process.
Yeah, and Stephen calls it, he says, you know, why would we bother with the clunky cognitive mind? That kind of slows everything down. Your
Totally.
brain and your body need to chat, and they need to know everything that's going on now, instantly. So it's like a monitoring that's happening, and you don't even have to consciously acknowledge it, which is beautiful, because then you can plan dinner, drive home, like do whatever it is you need to do where you have to actually use your conscious thought to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. That allows us to be so multitasking.
Beautiful.
So to describe to you, everyone, the rest of this understanding of this wonderful nerve is that the first time I heard about it, I was taking a somatic experiencing course, which those of you who are into trauma maybe know that Peter Levine has this very body based method of helping people release their trauma. And I was taking this course, and they had this wonderful graduate of the course video, and he was kind of like a fun actor, comedian. And so he was on stage acting out what is the polyvagal theory.
Imagine.
And he was saying about the evolution of species and how this nerve was developing. And he was saying, well, imagine this fishy from a long, like ancient fishy, many, many eras ago, swimming in the oceans. And all it had was the very basic vagus nerve at the time, which was in the back. It's called the dorsal vagal reaction. And let's say another sea creature would come up next to it, and they're just swimming in the ocean. And then
that was good. Could you do that again?
That's another sea creature would come up, and the only thing it could do, the only reaction it had at the time was freeze, was shut down, a possum. That's it. So that's the back, the dorsal part of the vagus nerve connection. And so it was just waiting till the other fishy leaves. Then its little body came out of that state. Then it went on its merry way. So then let's move us many eras forward. Now our vagus nerve is growing, and we have a fishy many, many, many eras from then. And now it has this whole new function coming from a little different part of the brainstem, where another sea creature comes by its way. And in addition to being able to freeze and do nothing but play dead, it also is able to run away, swim away, or fight back. It's like a smorgasbord of options to choose to protect itself. So, and all of these are about safety. All of these are about keeping us safe. So now it can freeze, it can run away, it can fight back. And then we have mammals being introduced again many eras later. And mammals did this really cool thing where rather than having 1,000 babies, burying them in the sand and hoping some of them made it alive to reproduce, we have mammals who just had a couple of live babies or a litter of live babies, and they all work together to keep them alive because they had this new part of their brain, and this part of this nervous plays into that, and it allows them to look at each other and engage. Like Nancy and I, we can look at each other's eyes, and we can see what our facial expressions mean, and we can listen to the tone of each other's voice. So then there was this social engagement aspect. And so this nerve covers all of that. So you can think about, as I'm describing, the people you know who, when something big comes up, they just shut down. That's it. Or maybe you know someone who, they are an escape artist. Like as soon as something hits the fan, they're out of there, because that's what their body does to protect them. Or you might know someone who they seem like an angry person, but that's their way of protecting themselves. That's their nervous system's way of dealing with whatever is going on. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think you did a brilliant job, particularly the fishy story. It was really great. Yeah. And these things all show up in relationship, right? And so, we're always looking for this, what you've described as the ventral vagus reaction in our relationships. Like we want people to engage with us. We want to have this back and forth in relationship. But relationship also triggers some of these earlier defense mechanisms, right? So, we've got the classic married couple where one half of the couple wants to talk and wants to engage, and in the very action of asking for that, the other part of the couple gets like the little fishy, and then just kind of runs and hides and goes silent. Right? So there's no wrong and bad to any of these things. This is a gift. to us that we've been given to be able to protect ourselves. Uh, and and the other point I want to make is that we don't live in one defensive strategy all the time. So I know I have some really strong dorsally based freeze strategies, but I also have some well developed, fight and flight kind of strategies, as well as my more ventral vagus engaging kind of strategies. So we've all got everything, but I think some of the strategies dominate our life in ways that we wish they didn't. And that's one of the ways that emotional freedom techniques can be really, really helpful at getting at these patterns and beginning to energetically get to the core and to begin to release them.
So this is exactly why we're talking about this lovely conscious EFT, because the whole time you're using this, you're keeping in mind the idea that there could be a trauma or a trigger, and it's just approaching it so that the person always feels safe, so they don't have
Yes.
to engage in the freeze or the runaway or the fight back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you go too quickly to those deeper defensive strategies, remember, this is all designed to have us feel in control and safe in our lives. And so if you go to those areas which are most vulnerable, if you go to those too quickly, then we don't have a system, a support system in place internally or externally that we can actually stay safe there. So that's why conscious EFT takes us in this phased approach, step by step by step, as the nervous system is prepared and ready to manage the information.
So we slipped in a little bit more than we thought in this episode, but I really hope that we didn't bore you and that you were able to come in with us and see why we're so excited about how we can help ourselves out through this beautiful technique, even if we're carrying a trigger from the past that you maybe see in your life now, that you can, in a very safe and gentle way, like Nancy said, in this phased way, be able to start helping yourself out. So we're going to get more into this in the next episode, where we talk about the ways that this shows up, how, if you're working with yourself or with someone else, how you can be regulating the whole time. And we're also going to get into how EFT, conscious EFT, ends up being an expansion of the field of work that we have going on, and the way that it can supercharge what you already have going on, so that maybe these lovely techniques you're already using, you can help them to work better. Or maybe if they were triggering to you before, you can release the places where they may have triggered you, so that you can finally harness their usefulness for yourself.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So before we go, we want to quickly ask you, just in the comments below, let us know in a 1 or 2 word, or maybe 3 if you really see all 3 of them fit you, which one you see or first came to mind when you were thinking of how your reaction is. I will start and say that I am pretty good at escaping. I'm pretty good at flight. Like, if I was a kid at school and there was a fight, everyone would be running to say, fight, fight. And I'd be out in the other direction. Like, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
So for you, what came to mind first for you? Or do you see how all 3 of them play out in your life for you? So let us know in the comments below, and stick around for our 4th installment of this multi-part series of how to use conscious EFT.
Great. Bye, Jen.